Going through all the second level D&D 5th edition spells. And to start us off, we have Acid Arrow, an action 90-foot range spell requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component being a powdered rhubarb leaf and an adder's stomach. When you cast the spell, a shimmering green arrow streaks towards a target within range and bursts in a spray of acid. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, the target takes 4d4 acid damage, and immediately 2d4 acid damage on the end of its next turn. On a miss, the arrow splashes the target with acid for half as much of the initial damage, and no damage at the end of its next turn. And of course, if you cast the spell using a slot level 3rd or higher, the damage, both initial and later, increases for 1d4 for each slot level above 2nd. Agonizer's Scorcher, a action spell with a range of 30 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being a red dragon's scale. When you cast this, a line of roaring flames, 30 feet long and 5 feet wide, emanates from you in a direction that you choose. Each creature in the line must make a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 3d8 fire damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. And if you cast the spell using a slot 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot level above 2nd. Aid, an action spell that lasts 8 hours and has a 30-foot range. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component is a tiny strap of white cloth. It bolsters your allies with toughness and resolve. Choose up to 3 creatures within range, that can be yourself. Each target's hit point maximum and current hit points increases by 5 for the duration. When you cast the spell using a slot level 3rd or higher, the target's hit point increases by an additional 5 for each slot level above 2nd. Notably, this is not a concentration spell. Next we have Alter Self, a concentration action spell that lasts 1 hour, and you cast it on yourself. You assume a different form, when you cast the spell. Choose one of the following options, the effects of which lasts for the duration of the spell. While the spell lasts, you can end one option as an action to gain the benefits of a different one. Aquatic adaptation. You adapt your body to an aquatic environment, sprouting gills and growing webbing between your fingers. You can breathe underwater, and you gain a swimming speed equal to your walking speed. Change appearance. You transform your appearance. You decide what you look like, including your height, weight, facial features, sound of your voice, hair color, coloration, and distinguishing characteristics, if any. You can make yourself appear as a member of another race, though none of your statistics change. You also can't appear as a creature of a different size than you, and your basic shape stays the same. So if you're bipedal, you can't use the spell to become a quadruped, for instance. At any time for the duration of the spell, you can use your action to change your appearance in this way again. Natural weapons. You grow claws, fangs, spines, horns, or a different natural weapon of your choice. Your unarmed strikes will deal 1d6 bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage as appropriate for the natural weapon you chose, and you are proficient with your unarmed strikes. Finally, the natural weapon is magic, and you have a +1 bonus to the attack and damage rolls you make using it. Next up is Animal Messenger, which is a ritual spell that requires verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being a morsel of food. It takes 1 action to cast, and it will last for 24 hours with a range of 30 feet. By means of the spell, you can use an animal to deliver a message. Choose a tiny beast that you can see within range, such as a squirrel, blue jay, or bat. You specify a location with which you must have visited, and a recipient who matches a general description, such as a man or woman dressed in a uniform of the town guard, or a red-haired dwarf wearing a pointed hat. You also speak a message of up to 25 words. The target beast travels for the duration of the spell towards the specified location, covering about 50 miles per 24 hours for a flying messenger, or 25 miles for other animals. When the messenger arrives, it delivers your message to the creature that you described, replicating the sound of your voice. The messenger speaks only to a creature matching the description you gave. If the messenger does not reach its destination before the spell ends, the message is lost, and the beast makes its way back to where it cast the spell. If you cast the spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, the duration of the spell increases by 48 hours for each slot level above 2nd. Next we have Arcane Lock, which is an action spell requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, and the material component is gold dust worth at least 25 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. It lasts until dispelled and requires you to touch the object as you touch a closed door, window, gate, chest, or other entryway, and it becomes locked for the duration. You and the creature you designate when you cast the spell can open the object normally. You can also set a password that, when spoken within 5 feet of the object, suppresses the spell for 1 minute. Otherwise, it is impassable until it is broken or the spell is dispelled or suppressed. Casting Knock on the object suppresses Arcane Lock for 10 minutes. Well affected by this spell, an object is no more difficult to break or force open. The DC to break it or pick any locks on it increases by 10. Arcanist's Magic Aura, an action touch spell requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being a small square of silk, and it lasts for 24 hours after being cast. You place an illusion on a creature or object you touch so that divination spells reveal false information about it. The target can be a willing creature or an object that isn't being carried or worn by another creature. When you cast the spell, choose one or both of the following effects. The effects last for the duration, and if you cast this spell on the same creature or object every day for 30 days, placing the same effect on it each time, the illusion lasts until it is dispelled. You can cast it with False Aura. You change the way that the target appears to spells and magical effects, such as Detect Magic. That Detect Magic auras so that you make a non-magical object appear magical, a magical object appear non-magical, or change the object's magical aura so it appears to belong to a specific school of magic that you choose. When you use this effect on an object, you can make the false magic apparent to any creature that handles the item. Mask. You can change the way the target appears to spells and magical effects that detect creature types, such as a paladin's divine sense, or the trigger of a symbol spell. You choose a creature type, and other spells and magical effects treat the target as if it were a creature of a type or of that alignment. Next we have Augury, a ritual, verbal, semantic, material component spell, that material component being specially marked sticks, bones, or similar tokens worth at least 25 gold pieces. It does not consume this, though. It requires 1 minute to cast, and you cast it on yourself. By casting gem-inlaid sticks, rolling dragon bones, or laying out ornate cards, or employing some other divining tool, you receive an omen from an otherworldly entity about the results of a specific course of action that you plan to take within the next 30 minutes. The DM chooses the following possible omens: wheel for good results, a woe for bad results, wheel and woe for both good and bad results, nothing for results that aren't specifically good or bad. The spell doesn't take into account any possible circumstances that might change the outcome, such as the casting of additional spells or the loss or gain of companion. If you cast the spell 2 or more times before completing your next long rest, there is a cumulative 25% chance for each casting after the first that you get a random reading. The DM makes the roll in secret. Bearskin, concentration spell that requires an action, and it lasts for 1 hour. And it requires verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being a handful of oak bark. You will touch a willing creature, can be yourself, Until the spell ends, that target's skin has a rough, bark-like appearance, and the target's AC can't be less than 16, regardless of what kind of armor it is wearing. Blindness and Deafness, an action spell that lasts for 1 minute and has a 30-foot range, requiring only verbal components. You can blind or deafen a foe. Choose one creature that you can see within range to make a Constitution saving throw. If it fails, the target is either blinded or deafened, your choice, for the duration. At the end of each of its turns, the target can make a Constitution saving throw. On a success, the spell ends. And when you cast a spell using a spell slot, 3rd level or higher, you can target one additional creature for each slot level above 2nd. Blur, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 minute, and you cast it on yourself. It requires only verbal components, and when you cast this, your body becomes blurred, shifting and weaving to all that can see you. For the duration, any creature has disadvantage on attack rolls against you. An attacker is immune to this effect if it doesn't rely on sight, such as blind sight, or can see through illusions with true sight. Branding Smite, a concentration bonus action spell that lasts for 1 minute, and you cast it on yourself. It requires only verbal components, where the next time you hit a creature with a weapon attack before this spell ends, the weapon gleams with an astral radiance as you strike. The attack deals 2d6 radiant damage extra to the target, which becomes visible if it is invisible, and the target sheds dim light in a 5-foot radius, and can't become invisible until the spell ends. When you cast the spell using a slot level 3rd or higher, the extra damage increases by 1d6 for each slot level above 2nd. Calm Emotions, a concentration action spell that lasts for 1 minute and has a range of 60 feet with a 20-foot sphere range within that. It requires verbal and semantic components, and when you cast it, you attempt to suppress strong emotions in a group of people. Each humanoid in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point you choose within range must make a charisma saving throw. A creature can choose to fail this saving throw if it wishes. If a creature fails its saving throw, choose one of the following 2 effects. You can suppress any effect causing the target to be charmed or frightened. When the spell ends, any suppressed effect resumes, provided that its duration has not expired in the meantime. Alternatively, you can make a target indifferent about a creature of your choice that is hostile toward. This indifferent ends if the target is attacked or harmed by a spell. If it witnesses any of its friends being harmed, when the spell ends, the creature becomes hostile again unless the DM rules otherwise. Next we have Continual Flame, an action spell requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being ruby dust worth 50 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. It lasts until dispelled, and a flame of equivalent in brightness to a torch springs forth from an object that you touch. The effect looks like a regular flame, but it creates no heat and doesn't use oxygen. A continual flame can be covered or hidden, but not smothered or quenched. Darkness, a concentration action spell that lasts 10 minutes. Its range is 60 feet with a 15-foot sphere within that range, and it requires verbal and material components, that material component being bat fur and a drop of pitch or a piece of coal. When you cast this, magical darkness spreads from a point you choose within range to fill a 15-foot radius sphere for the duration. The darkness spreads around corners. A creature with dark vision can't see through this darkness, and non-magical light can't illuminate it. If the point you choose is an object you are holding, or one that isn't being worn or carried, the darkness emanates from the object and moves with it, completely covering the source of darkness with an opaque object, such as a bowl or helm, blocks the darkness. If the spell's aura overlaps with an area of light created by a spell of 2nd level or lower, the spell that created the light is dispelled. Dark Vision, an action spell requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component is either a pinch of dried carrot or an agate. It lasts for 8 hours, and you will touch a willing creature to grant it the ability to see in the dark for the duration. That creature has dark vision out to a range of 60 feet. Next we have Detect Thoughts, a concentration action spell that lasts 1 minute, and you cast it on yourself with verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component is a copper piece, which the spell does not consume. For the duration, you can read the thoughts of certain creatures. When you cast the spell, and as your action on each turn until the spell ends, you can focus your mind on any one creature that you can see within 30 feet of you. If the creature you chose has an intelligence of 3 or lower, or doesn't speak any language, the creature is unaffected. You initially learn the surface thoughts of creatures, what is most on the mind at the moment. And as an action, you can either shift your attention to another creature's thoughts, or attempt to probe deeper into the same creature's mind. If you probe deeper, the target must make a wisdom saving throw. If it fails, you gain insight into its reasoning, if any, its emotional state, and something that looms large in its mind, such as something it worries over, loves, or hates. If it succeeds, the spell ends. Either way, the target knows that you are probing into its mind, and unless you shift your attention to another creature's thoughts, the creature can use its action on its turn to make an intelligence check contested by your intelligence check. If it succeeds, the spell ends. Questions verbally detect at the target creature naturally shape the course of its thoughts, so this spell is particularly effective as part of an interrogation. You can also use this spell to detect the presence of thinking creatures you can't see. When you cast this spell, or as an action during your turn, you can search for thoughts within 30 feet of you. This spell can penetrate barriers, but 2 feet of rock, 2 inches of any metal other than lead, or a thin sheet of lead blocks you. You cannot detect a creature with an intelligence of 3 or lower, or one that doesn't speak any language. Once you detect the presence of a creature in this way, you can read its thoughts for the rest of the duration as described above, even if you can't see it, but it still must be within range. Next we have Dust Devil, a concentration action spell that lasts for 1 minute and has a range of 60 feet with a 5-foot cube in that range. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components, and the material component is a pinch of dust. Casting this, you can choose an unoccupied 5-foot cube of air that you can see within range. An elemental force that resembles a dust devil appears in the cube and lasts for the spell's duration. Any creature that ends its turn within 5 feet of the dust devil must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, that creature takes 1d8 bludgeoning damage and is pushed 10 feet away. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't pushed. As a bonus action, you can move the Dust Devil up to 30 feet in any direction. If the Dust Devil moves over sand, dust, loose dirt, or small gravel, it sucks up the material and forms a 10-foot radius cloud of debris around itself that lasts until the start of your next turn. This cloud heavily obscures its area. And when you cast the spell using a slot level 3rd or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot level above 2nd. Earthbind, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 minute and has a 300-foot range. It requires only verbal components, and you can choose one creature that you can see within range. Yellow strips of magical energy loop around the creature. The target must succeed a strength saving throw, or its flying speed, if any, is reduced to 0 feet for the spell's duration. An airborne creature affected by this spell safely descends at 60 foot per round until it reaches the ground or the spell ends. Enhance Ability, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 hour and requires verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component being a fur or a feather from a beast. You can touch a willing creature and bestow upon it magical enhancement. Choose one of the following effects. The target gains the effect until the spell ends. Bear's Endurance. The target has advantage on constitution checks and also gains 2d6 temporary hit points, which are lost when the spell ends. Bull's Strength. The target has advantage on strength checks. and his or her carrying capacity doubles. Cat's Grace. The target has advantage on dexterity checks. It also doesn't take damage from falling 20 feet or less if it isn't incapacitated. Eagle's Splendor. The target has advantage on charisma checks. Fox's Cunning. The target has advantage on intelligence checks. Owl's Wisdom. The target has advantage on wisdom checks. And when you cast the spell using a slot level 3rd or higher, you can target one additional creature for each slot level above 2nd. Next up, Enlarge Reduce, a concentration action spell that lasts for 1 minute and has a 30-foot range. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a pinch of powdered iron. You can cause a creature or object you can see within range to grow larger or smaller for the duration. Choose either a creature or an object that is neither worn nor carried. If the target is unwilling, they can make a Constitution saving throw. On a success, the spell has no effect. If the target is a creature, everything it is wearing and carrying changes size with it. Any items dropped by an affected creature return to normal size at once. Enlarge. The target size doubles in all dimensions, and its weight is multiplied by 8. This growth increases its size by 1 category, from medium to large, for example. If there isn't enough room for the target to double in size, the creature or object attains the maximum possible size in its space available until the spell ends. This target also has advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. The target's weapon also grows to match its new size. While these weapons are enlarged, the target attacks deal 1d4 extra damage. Reduce. The target size is halved in all dimensions. Its weight is reduced by 1/8 of normal, and the reduction decreases its size by 1 category, from small to medium, for example. Until the spell ends, the target also has disadvantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. The target's weapons also shrink to match its new size. While these weapons are reduced, the target's attacks with them deal 1d4 less damage. This can't reduce the damage below 1. Next up is Enthrall, an action spell that lasts for 1 minute and has a range of 60 feet. It requires verbal and semantic components, and when you cast this, you will weave a distracting string of words, causing a creature of your choice that you can see within range and that can hear you to make a wisdom saving throw. Any creature that can't be charmed succeeds on the saving throw automatically, and if you or your companions are fighting a creature, it has advantage on the save. But on a failed save, the target has a disadvantage on wisdom perception checks made to perceive any creature other than you until the spell ends, or until the target can no longer hear you. The spell ends if you are incapacitated or no longer can speak. Next we have Find Steed, requiring 10 minutes to cast and has a 30-foot range. It requires verbal and semantic components, and you will summon a spirit that assumes the form of an unusually intelligent, strong, and loyal steed, creating a long-lasting bond with it. Appearing in an unoccupied space within range, the steed takes the form that you choose: a warhorse, a pony, a camel, an elk, or a mastiff. Your GM might allow other animals to be summoned as steeds. That steed has statistics of the chosen form, though it is a celestial, fey, or fiend, your choice, instead of the normal type. Additionally, if your steed has an intelligence of 5 or less, the intelligence becomes 6, and it gains the ability to understand one language of your choice that you speak. Your steed serves you as a mount both in combat and out, and you have an instinctive bond with it that allows you to fight as a seamless unit. While mounted on your steed, you can make any spell you cast that targets only you also target your steed. When your steed drops to 0 hit points, it disappears, leaving behind no physical form. You can also dismiss your steed at any time as an action, causing it to disappear. In either case, casting this spell again summons the same steed, restored to its max hit points. While your steed is within 1 mile of you, you can communicate with each other telepathically, and you can't have more than 1 steed bonded by this spell at a time. As an action, you can release the steed from its bond at any time, causing it to disappear. Next we have Find Traps, an action spell that has a range of 120 feet and has verbal and semantic requirements. You can sense the presence of any traps within range that is within line of sight. A trap, for the purpose of the spell, includes anything that would inflict a sudden or unexpected effect on you, considered harmful or undesirable, which was specifically intended as such by its creator. Thus, the spell would sense an area affected by the alarm spell, a glyph of warding, or a magical pit trap, but it would not reveal a natural weakness in the floor, or an unstable ceiling, or a hidden sinkhole. The spell merely reveals a trap that is present. You don't learn of the location of each trap, but you do learn the general nature of the danger posed by the trap you sense. Flame Blade, a concentration bonus action spell that lasts for 10 minutes that you cast on yourself, using verbal, semantic, and material components. You invoke a fiery blade in your free hand. The blade is similar in size and shape to a scimitar and lasts for the duration. If you let go of the blade, it disappears, but you can invoke the blade again as a bonus action. You can use your action to make a melee spell attack with the fiery blade. On a hit, the target takes 3d6 fire damage. The flaming blade shades bright light in a 10-foot radius and dim light for an additional 10 feet. At higher levels, when you cast the spell using a slot of 4th level or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for every 2 slot levels above 2nd. Flaming Sphere, a concentration action spell that lasts for 1 minute and has a 60-foot range with a 5-foot sphere range in that. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components. And when you cast this, a 5-foot diameter sphere of fire appears in an unoccupied space of your choice within range. It lasts for the duration. Any creature that ends its turn within 5 feet of the sphere must make a dexterity saving throw. The creature takes 2d6 fire damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. As a bonus action, you can move the sphere up to 30 feet. If you ram the sphere into a creature, that creature must make the saving throw against the sphere's damage, and the sphere stops moving this turn. When you move the sphere, you can direct it over barriers up to a 5-foot tall and jump it across pits up to 10 feet wide. The sphere ignites flammable objects not being worn or carried, and sheds bright light in a 20-foot radius, and dim light for an additional 20 feet. When you cast the spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for each slot level above 2nd. Next we have Gentle Repose, a ritual action spell that will last for 10 days and requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a pinch of salt and 1 copper piece placed on each of the corpse's eyes, which must remain there for the duration. You touch a corpse or other remains. For the duration, the target is protected from decay and can't become undead. The spell also effectively extends the time limit on raising the target from the dead, since the days are spent under the influence of the spell don't count against the time limit for spells such as Raise Dead. Gust of Wind, a concentration action spell that lasts for 1 minute, which you cast on yourself. And it requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a legume seed. A line of strong wind, 60 feet long and 10 feet wide, blasts from you in a direction you choose. For the spell's duration, each creature that starts its turn in the line must succeed on a strength saving throw or be pushed 15 feet away from you in the direction following the line. Any creature in this line must spend 2 feet of movement for every 1 foot it moves when moving closer to you, so it's difficult terrain. The gust disperses gas or vapor and extinguishes candles, torches, and similar unprotected flames in the area. It causes protected flames, such as those of lanterns, to dance wildly and has a 50% chance to extinguish them. As a bonus action, on each of your turns before the spell ends, you can change the direction in which the line blasts from you. Next up, we have Heat Metal, a concentration action spell that lasts for 1 minute, has a range of 60 feet, and requires verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a piece of iron and a flame. You choose a manufactured metal object, such as a metal weapon or a suit of heavy or medium metal armor that you can see within range. You can cause the object to glow red hot. Any creature in physical contact with the object takes 2d8 fire damage when you cast the spell, and until the spell ends, you can use a bonus action on each of your subsequent turns to cause this damage again. If a creature holding or wearing an object and it takes damage from it, the creature must succeed a Constitution saving throw or drop the object if it can. If it doesn't drop the object, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the start of your next turn. And if you cast this spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot level above 2nd. Next up, we have Hold Person, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 minute and has a range of 60 feet. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a small, straight piece of iron. You can choose a humanoid that you can see within range. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be paralyzed for the duration. At the end of each of its turns, the target can make another wisdom saving throw. On a success, the spell ends on the target. And when you cast the spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, you can target 1 additional humanoid for each slot level above 2nd. The humanoids must be within 30 feet of each other when you target them. Next we have Invisibility, a concentration action spell lasting 1 hour, and it requires verbal, semantics, and material component, which is an eyelash encased in gum arabic. And you touch a creature that becomes invisible until the spell ends. Anything the target is wearing or carrying is invisible as long as it's on the target's person. The spell ends for a target that attacks or casts a spell. And if you cast a spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, you can target 1 additional creature for each slot level above 2nd. Knock, an action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal components. You choose an object that you can see within range. The object can be a door, a box, a chest, a set of manacles, a padlock, or another object that contains a mundane or magical means that prevents access. A target that is held shut by mundane lock or that is stuck or buried becomes unlocked, unstuck, or unbarred. If the object has multiple locks, only one of them is unlocked. If you choose a target that is held shut with an arcane lock, that spell is suppressed for 10 minutes, during which time the target can be opened and shut normally. And when you cast a spell, a loud knock, audible from as far as 300 feet, emanates from the target object. Lesser Restoration, an action spell requiring verbal and semantic components, where you touch a willing creature that you can end either 1 disease or 1 condition afflicting it. The conditions can be blinded, deafened, paralyzed, or poisoned. Levitate, a concentration action spell that will last for 10 minutes and has a range of 60 feet. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being either a small leaf, loop, or piece of golden wire bent into a cup shape with a long shank on one end. 1 creature or loose object of your choice that you can see within range rises vertically up to 20 feet and remains suspended there for the duration. The spell can levitate a target that weighs up to 5,000 pounds. An unwilling creature that succeeds on a Constitution saving throw is unaffected. The target can move only by pushing or pulling against a fixed object or surface within reach, such as a wall or a ceiling, which allows it to move as if it were climbing. You can change the target's altitude by up to 20 feet in either direction on your turn. If you are the target, you can move up or down as part of your move. Otherwise, you can use your action to move the target, which must remain within the spell's range. When the spell ends, the target floats gently to the ground as if it is still aloft. Locate animals or plants. An ritual action spell that you cast on yourself using verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a bit of fur from a bloodhound. You describe a name, a specific kind of beast or plant, concentrating on the voice of nature in your surroundings. You learn the direction and distance to the closest creature or plant of that kind within 5 miles, if any are present. Locate object, a concentration action spell that lasts for 10 minutes that you cast on yourself with verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a forked twig. You describe a name of an object that is familiar to you. You sense the direction to the object's location, as long as the object is within 1,000 feet of you. If the object is in motion, you know the direction of its movement. The spell can locate a specific object known to you as long as you have seen it up close, within 30 feet at least once. Alternatively, the spell can locate the nearest object of a particular kind, such as a certain kind of apparel, jewelry, furniture, tool, or weapon. The spell can't locate an object in any thickness of lead, and even a thin sheet blocks a direct path between you and the object will stop the spell from going through. Magic Mouth, a 1-minute casting time spell with a range of 30 feet requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a small bit of honeycomb and jade dust worth at least 10 gold pieces, which the spell consumes, and it will last until it's dispelled. Where you implant a message within an object in range, a message that is uttered when a trigger condition is met. Choose an object you can see that isn't being worn or carried by another creature. Then speak a message, which must be 25 words or less, though it can be delivered over as long as 10 minutes. Finally, determine the circumstance that will trigger the spell to deliver your message. When that circumstance occurs, a magical mouth appears on the object and recites the message in your voice, and at the same volume you spoke. If the object you chose has a mouth or something that looks like a mouth, for example the mouth of a statue, the magical mouth appears there so that it would appear to have the object's mouth. When you cast this spell, you can have the spell end after it delivers its message, or it can remain and repeats its message whenever the trigger occurs. The triggering circumstance can be as general or as detailed as you'd like, though it must be based on visual or auditable conditions that occur within 30 feet of the object. For example, you could instruct the mouth to speak when any creature moves within 30 feet of the object, or when a silver bell rings within 30 feet of it. Magic Weapon, a concentration bonus action spell that will last for 1 hour and requires verbal and semantic components. You touch a non-magical weapon. Until the spell ends, that weapon becomes a magic weapon with a +1 bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls. And if you cast the spell using a spell slot of 4th level or higher, the bonus increases to a +2. When you use a spell of 6th level or higher, the bonus increases to a +3. Maximilian's Earthen Grasp, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 minute and has a 30-foot range within a 5-foot cube of that range, where requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being a miniature hand sculpted from clay. You choose a 5-foot square unoccupied space on the ground that you can see within range. A medium hand made from a compacted soil raises there and reaches for one creature you can see within 5 feet of it. The target must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, the target takes 2d6 bludgeoning damage and is restrained for the spell's duration. As an action, you can cause the hand to crush the restrained target who made the strength saving throw. It takes 2d6 bludgeoning damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. To break out, the restrained target can use its action to make a strength check against your spell save DC. On a success, the target escapes and is no longer restrained by the hand. As an action, you can cause the hand to reach for a different creature, or to move to a different unoccupied space within range. The hand releases a restrained target if you do either. Mirror Image, an action spell that lasts for 1 minute that you cast upon yourself using verbal and semantic components. When you cast this, 3 illusionary duplicates of yourself appear in your space. Until the spell ends, the duplicates move with you and mimic your actions, shifting positions so it's impossible to track which image is real. You can use your action to dismiss the illusionary duplicates. Each time a creature targets you with an attack during the spell's duration, roll a d20 to determine whether the attack instead targets one of your duplicates. If you have 3 duplicates, you must roll a 6 or higher to change the attack's target to a duplicate. With 2 duplicates, you must roll an 8 or higher, and with 1 duplicate, you must roll an 11 or higher. The duplicate's AC equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier. If an attack hits a duplicate, the duplicate is destroyed. A duplicate can be destroyed only by an attack that hits it. It ignores all other damage and effects. The spell ends when all 3 duplicates are destroyed. A creature is unaffected by this spell if it can't see it, if it relies on senses other than sight, such as blind sight, or if it can pierce illusionaries as false with true sight. Misty Step. A bonus action spell that you cast on yourself using just verbal components. Briefly surrounded by a silvery mist, you can teleport up to 30 feet into an unoccupied space that you can see. Moonbeam, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 minute and has a 120-foot range with a 5-foot cylinder in that range. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components to cast, and the material component is several seeds of any moon seed plant and a piece of opalescent feldspar. A silvery beam of pale light shines down in a 5-foot radius, 40-foot high cylinder, centered on a point within range. Until the spell ends, dim light fills the cylinder. When a creature enters the spell's area for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there, it is engulfed by ghostly flames that cause searing pain and must make a Constitution saving throw. It takes 2d10 radiant damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. And a shape changer makes its saving throw with disadvantage. If it fails, it also instantly reverts to its original form and can't assume a different form until it leaves the spell's light. On each of your turns after you cast this spell, you can use an action to move the beam up to 60 feet in any direction. And if you cast a spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d10 for each slot level above 2nd. Next up, we have Pass Without a Trace, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 hour that you cast on yourself, using verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component being ashes from a burned leaf of mistletoe and a sprig of spruce. When you cast this, a veil of shadows and silence radiates from you, masking you and your companions from detection. For the duration, each creature you choose within 30 feet of you, including you, has a plus 10 bonus to dexterity stealth checks and can't be tracked except by magical means. A creature that receives this bonus leaves behind no tracks or other traces of its passage. Next up, we have Prayer of Healing, which requires 10 minutes to cast, and it has a range of 30 feet, requiring only verbal components. When you cast this, up to 6 creatures of your choice that you can see within range each regain hit points equal to 2d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. This spell has no effect on undead or constructs. When you cast this spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, the healing increases by 1d8 for each slot level above 2nd. Protection from Poison. An action spell that lasts for 1 hour, where it requires verbal and semantic components for you to touch a creature, and if it is poison, you neutralize the poison. If more than 1 poison afflicts the target, you neutralize 1 poison that you know is present, or you neutralize 1 at random. For the duration, the target has advantage on saving throws against being poisoned, and has resistance to poison damage. And that's for that 1 hour that after you cast it. Pyrotechnics. An action spell with a range of 60 feet with a 5-foot cube range inside that. It requires verbal and semantic components. You choose an area of non-magical flame that you can see and that fits within a 5-foot cube within range. You can extinguish the fire in the area and create either fireworks or smoke when you do so. Fireworks. The target explodes with dazzling displays of colors. Each creature within 10 feet of the target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw or become blinded until the end of your next turn. Smoke. Thick black smoke spreads out from the target in a 20-foot radius, moving around corners. The area of smoke is heavily obscured. The smoke persists for 1 minute or until a strong wind disperses it. Ray of Enfeeblement, a concentration action spell that lasts for 1 minute with a 60-foot range requiring verbal and semantic components. A black beam of enervating energy springs from your finger toward a creature within range. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, the target deals only half damage with weapon attacks that use strength until the spell ends. At the end of each of the target's turns, it can make a Constitution saving throw against the spell, and on a success, the spell ends. Next up is Rope Trick, an action spell that lasts for 1 hour, where you use verbal and semantic and material components, that material component being powdered corn extract and a twist loop of parchment. And then you touch a length of rope that is up to 60 feet long. One end of the rope then rises into the air until the whole rope hangs perpendicular to the ground. At the upper end of the rope, an invisible entrance opens to an extra-dimensional space that lasts until the spell ends. It lasts for 1 hour. The extra-dimensional space can be reached by climbing to the top of the rope, and the space can hold as many as 8 medium or smaller creatures. The rope can be pulled into the space, making the rope disappear from view outside of the space. Attacks and spells can't cross through the entrance or out of the extra-dimensional space, but those inside can see out of it as if through a 3 foot by 5 window centered on the rope. Anything inside the extra-dimensional space drops out when the spell ends. Scorching Ray, an action spell with a range of 120 feet that requires verbal and semantic components. You create 3 rays of fire and hurl them at a target within range. You can hurl them at one target or several. Make a ranged spell attack for each ray. On a hit, the target takes 2d6 fire damage. And when you cast the spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, you create 1 additional ray for each spell slot above 2nd. Invisibility, an action spell that you cast on yourself for an hour, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a pinch of talac and a small sprinkling of powdered silver. For the duration, you can see invisible creatures and objects as if they were visible, and you can see into the ethereal plane. Ethereal creatures and objects appear ghostly and translucent. Shatter, an action spell with a range of 60 feet, a 10-foot sphere within that range, and it requires verbal, semantic, and material components. A sudden loud ringing noise, painfully intense, erupts from the point of your choice within range. Each creature in a 10-foot radius sphere centered on a point must make a Constitution saving throw. A creature takes 3d8 thunder damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. A creature made of inorganic material, such as stone, crystal, or metal, has disadvantage on this saving throw. A non-magical object that isn't being worn or carried also takes the damage if it is in the spell's area. And if you cast the spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each spell slot above 2nd. Silence, a concentration spell that is also a ritual spell that requires an action to cast and has a range of 120 feet, as well as verbal and semantic components. Will last for up to 10 minutes. And for the duration, no sound can be created within or pass through a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point that you choose within range. Any creature or object entirely inside the sphere is immune to thunder damage, and creatures are deafened while entirely inside of it. Casting a spell that includes a verbal component is impossible as well. I write, a concentration ritual spell that requires 1 action and will last for 1 hour, and its range is sight. It requires verbal and semantic components. You can cause up to 10 words to form in a part of the sky you can see. The words appear to be made of cloud and remain in place for the spell's duration. The words dissipate when the spell ends. A strong wind can disperse the clouds and end the spell early. Snillock's Snowball Swarm, an action spell with a range of 90 feet with a 5-foot sphere in that range. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being a piece of ice or small white rock chip. A flurry of magic snowballs erupts from a point you choose within range. Each creature within a 5-foot radius sphere centered on a point must make a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 3d6 cold damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. And if you cast this spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for each slot level above 2nd. Spider Climb, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 hour, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component is a drop of bitumen and a spider. Until the spell ends, one willing creature that you touch gains the ability to move up, down, and across vertical surfaces and upside down along ceilings, while leaving its hands free. The target also gains a climbing speed equal to its walking speed. Spike Growth, a concentration action spell with a range of 150 feet. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component being 7 sharp thorns or 7 small twigs, each sharpened to a point. It lasts for up to 10 minutes, and when you cast it, the ground in a 20-foot radius, centered on a point within range, twists and sprouts hard spikes and thorns. The area becomes difficult terrain for the duration, and when a creature moves into the area or is within the area, it takes 2d4 piercing damage for every 5 feet it travels. The transformation of the ground is camouflaged to look natural. Any creature that can't see the area at the time the spell is cast must make a wisdom perception check against your spell save DC to recognize the terrain as hazardous before entering it. Spiritual Weapon, a bonus action spell that lasts for 1 minute with a range of 60 feet. It requires verbal and semantic components, and you can create a floating spectral weapon within this range that lasts for the duration, or until you cast the spell again. When you cast the spell, you can make a melee spell attack against a creature within 5 feet of the weapon. On a hit, the target takes force damage equal to 1d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. As a bonus action on your turn, you can move the weapon up to 20 feet and repeat the attack against a creature within 5 feet of it. The weapon can take whatever form you choose, and when you cast the spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for every 2 slot levels above 2nd. Suggestion, a concentration action spell that will last for 8 hours and has a range of 30 feet. It requires verbal and material components, and the material component is a snake's tongue and either a bit of honeycomb or a drop of sweet whale. You suggest a course of activity limited to a sentence or 2, and magically influence a creature you see within range that can hear and understand you. Creatures that can't be charmed are immune to this effect. The suggestion must be worded in such a manner as to make the course of action sound reasonable. Asking the creature to stab itself, throw itself on a spear, immolate itself, or do some other obviously harmful act ends the spell. The target must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, it pursues the course of action you described to the best of its ability. The suggested course of action can continue for the entire duration. If the suggested activity can't be completed in a shorter time, the spell ends when the subject finishes what it was asked to do. You can also specify conditions that will trigger a special activity during the duration. For example, you might suggest that a knife given to a warhorse to the first beggar she meets. If the condition isn't met before the spell expires, the activity isn't performed. If you or any of your companions damage the target, the spell ends early. Next up, we have Warding Bond, an action spell that lasts for 1 hour, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component is a pair of platinum rings worth at least 50 gold pieces each, and which you and the target must wear for the duration. This spell wards a willing creature you touch and creates a mystical connection between you and the target until the spell ends. While the target is within 60 feet of you, it gains a +1 bonus to AC and saving throws, and it has resistance to all damage. Also, each time it takes damage, you take the same amount of damage. The spell ends if you drop to 0 hit points, or if you and the target become separated by more than 60 feet. It also ends if the spell is cast again on either of the connected creatures. You can also dismiss the spell as an action. Warding Wind, a concentration action spell that lasts for 10 minutes, and you cast it on yourself, giving you a 10-foot radius sphere around you. It requires verbal components, and then a strong wind, 20 miles per hour, blows around you in a 10-foot radius and moves with you, remaining centered on you. The wind lasts for the spell's duration, and the wind has the following effects. It deafens you and other creatures in its area. It extinguishes unprotected flames in its area that are torch-sized or smaller. It hedges out vapors, gas, and fog that can be dispersed by strong wind. The area is difficult terrain for creatures other than you, and attack rolls of a ranged weapon attacks have disadvantage if the attack pass in or out of the wind. Web, a concentration action spell that lasts for 1 hour, with a 60-foot range, a 20-foot cube within that range. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components, with that material component being a bit of spiderweb. You conjure a mass of thick, sticky webbing at a point centered on a choice within range. The webs fill a 20-foot cube from that point for the duration. The webs are difficult terrain and lightly obscure their area. If the webs aren't anchored between two solid masses, such as walls or trees, or layered across a floor, wall, or ceiling, the conjured webs collapse on itself, and the spell ends at the start of your next turn. Webs layered over a flat surface have a depth of 5 feet. Each creature that starts its turn in the webs or that enters them during their turn must make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, the creature is restrained as long as it remains in the webs or until it breaks free. A creature restrained by the webs can use its action to make a strength check against your spell save DC. If it succeeds, it is no longer restrained. The webs are flammable. Any 5-foot cube of web exposed to fire burns away in 1 round, dealing 2d4 damage to any creature that starts its turn in the fire. Zone of Truth, an action spell that lasts for 10 minutes and has a range of 60 feet with a 15-foot sphere in that range. You can create a magical zone that guards against deception in a 15-foot radius sphere centered on a point of your choice within range. Until the spell ends, a creature that enters your spell's area for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there must make a charisma saving throw. On a failed save, a creature can't speak a deliberate lie within in the radius. You know whether each creature succeeds or fails its saving throw. An afflicted creature is aware of the spell and can avoid answering questions to which it would normally respond with a lie, such as a creature can be evasive in its answers, as long as it remains within the boundaries of the truth. Air Bubble, an action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring only semantic components that lasts for 24 hours, where you create a spectral globe around the head of a willing creature you can see within range. The globe is filled with fresh air that lasts until the spell ends. If the creature has more than one head, the globe of air appears around only one of its head, which is all the creature needs to avoid suffocation, assuming that all its heads share the same respiratory system. And if you cast the spell at higher levels, of a 3rd slot level or higher, you can create 2 additional globes of fresh air for each slot level above 2nd. Beast Sense, a concentration action spell that requires semantic components, and it will last for up to 1 hour, where you touch a willing beast, and for the duration of the spell, you can use your action to see through the beast's eyes and hear what it hears, and continue to do so until you use your action to return to normal senses. Borrowed Knowledge, a action spell that you cast on yourself, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a book worth at least 25 gold pieces, and it will last for 1 hour, where you draw on the knowledge of the spirits of the past. Choose one skill in which you lack proficiency, and for the spell's duration, you have proficiency in the chosen skill. The spell ends early if you cast it again. Next up, we have Cloud of Daggers, a concentration action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a sliver of glass. It lasts up for 1 minute, and you fill the air with spinning daggers in a cube 5 feet on each side, centered on a point you choose within range. A creature takes 4d4 slashing damage when it enters the spell's area for the first time, and on a turn, it starts its turn there. At higher levels, when you cast the spell, the damage will increase for 2d4 for each slot level above second. Next, we have Cordon of Arrows, a action spell requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being 4 or more arrows or bolts. Its range is only 5 feet, but it lasts 8 hours, and you plant 4 pieces of non-magical ammunition, arrows or crossbow bolts, in the ground within range, and lay magic upon them to protect an area. Until the spell ends, whenever a creature other than you comes within 30 feet of the ammunition for the first time on a turn or ends its turn there, 1 piece of ammunition flies up to strike it. The creature must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take 1d6 piercing damage. The piece of ammunition is then destroyed. The spell ends when no ammunition remains. When you cast the spell, you can designate any creature you choose, and the spell ignores them. I would assume you can designate multiple creatures. Yeah. And if you cast a spell at higher levels, so 3rd level or higher, the amount of ammunition can be affected increases by 2 for each slot above 2nd level. Crown of Madness, a concentration action spell that has a range of 120 feet and requires verbal and semantic components. And it will last for up to 1 minute, where you cast it on one humanoid of your choice that you can see within range, and they must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or become charmed by you for the duration. While the target is charmed in this way, a twisted crown of jagged iron appears on its head, and its madness glows in its eyes. The charmed target must use its action before moving on each of its turns to make a melee attack against a creature other than itself that you mentally choose. The target can act normally on its turn if you choose no creature or if none are within its reach. On your subsequent turns, you must use your action to maintain control over the target, or the spell ends. Also, the target can make a wisdom saving throw at the end of each of its turns. On a success, the spell ends. Dragon's Breath, a concentration bonus action spell requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component is a hot pepper, and it will last for up to 1 minute, where you touch one willing creature and imbue it with the power to spew magical energy from its mouth, provided it has one. Choose acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison, and until the spell ends, the creature can use an action to exhale energy of the chosen type in a 15-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a dexterity saving throw, taking 3d6 damage of the chosen type on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. And if you cast a spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for each slot level above 2nd. Flock of Familiars, a concentration spell that takes 1 minute to cast and requires verbal and semantic components, lasting up to 1 hour. You temporarily summon 3 familiars, spirits that take the animal forms of your choice. Each familiar uses the same rules and options for the familiar conjured by Find Familiar spell. All the familiars conjured by this spell must be the same type of creature, celestials, fae, or fiends, your choice. If you already have a familiar conjured by the Find Familiar spell, or similar means, then 1 fewer familiars are conjured by this spell. Familiars summoned by this spell can telepathically communicate with you and share their visual or auditory senses while they are within 1 mile of you. When you cast a spell with the range of touch, one of the familiars conjured by the spell can deliver the spell as normal. However, you can cast a touch spell through only 1 familiar per turn. And if you cast this spell with a 3rd level or higher spell slot, you can conjure an additional familiar for each slot level above 2nd. Fortune's Favor, a 1 minute cast time spell with a range of 60 feet that lasts for 1 hour, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. And the material component being a white pearl worth at least 100 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. You impart latent luck to yourself or 1 willing creature you can see within range. When the chosen creature makes an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw before the spell ends, it can dismiss this spell on itself to roll an additional d20 and choose which of the d20s to use. Alternatively, when an attack roll is made against the chosen creature, it can dismiss the spell on itself to roll a d20 and choose which of the d20s to use. the one it rolled or the one the attacker rolled. If the original d20 roll has advantage or disadvantage, the creature rolls the additional d20 after advantage or disadvantage has been applied to the original roll. And when you cast this spell slot using a 3rd level or higher, you can target one additional creature for each slot level above 2nd. Gift of Gab. It requires your reaction, which you can take when you speak to another creature. And you cast it on yourself using verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being 2 gold coins, which is consumed as a tax for using this spell. When you cast this spell, you skillfully reshape the memories of listeners in your immediate area, so that each creature of your choice within 5 feet of you forgets everything you said within the last 6 seconds. Those creatures then remember that you actually said the words you speak as the verbal components for this spell. Healing Spirit, a concentration bonus action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal and semantic components, and it will last for up to 1 minute. You can call forth a nature spirit to soothe the wounded. The intangible spirit appears in a space that is a 5-foot cube you can see within range. The spirit looks like a transparent beast or fae, and until the spell ends, whenever a creature you can see moves into the spirit's space for the first time on its turn or starts its turn there, you can cause the spirit to restore 1d6 hit points to that creature. No action required. The spirit can't heal constructs or undead. And as a bonus action on your turn, you can move the spirit up to 30 feet to a space you can see. The spirit can heal a number of times equal to 1 plus your spellcasting ability modifier, minimum of twice. After healing that number of times, the spirit disappears. And if you cast this spell using a slot level 3rd or higher, the healing increases by 1d6 for each slot level above 2nd. Movable Object. An action spell that will last for 1 hour, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being gold dust, worth at least 25 gold pieces, and the spell consumes this. You touch an object that weighs no more than 10 pounds and cause it to become magically fixed in place. You and the creature you designate when you cast this spell can move the object normally. You can also set a password that, when spoken within 5 feet of the object, suppresses the spell for 1 minute. If the object is fixed in the air, it can hold up to 4,000 pounds of force. More weight causes the object to fall. Otherwise, a creature can use an action to make a strength check against your spell save DC. On a success, the creature can move the object up to 10 feet. And if you cast this spell using a slot of 4th or 5th level, the DC to move the object increases by 5, and it can carry up to 8,000 pounds of force. The duration increases to 24 hours. And if you cast this spell using a spell slot 6th level or higher, the DC to move the object increases by 10, and it can carry up to 20,000 pounds of force, and the effect is permanent until dispelled. Jim's Glowing Coin. A action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring semantic and material components. The material component being a coin, which is 2 gold coins consumed for the tax of the spell. And it will last for up to 1 minute. When you cast this spell, the 2 coins turn into 1 coin, which you can hurl at any spot within range. The coin lights up as if it was under the effect of a light spell. Each creature of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of the coin must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be distracted for the duration. While distracted, a creature has disadvantage on wisdom, perception checks, and initiative rolls. Next up, we have Kinetic Jaunt, a concentration bonus action spell which you cast on yourself using semantic components, and it will last for up to 1 minute. You magically empower your movement with dance-like steps, giving yourself the following benefits for the duration. Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. You don't provoke opportunity attacks, and you can move through the space of another creature, and it doesn't count as difficult terrain. If you end your turn in another creature's space, you are shunted to the last unoccupied space you occupied and take 1d8 force damage, although. Mind Spike, a concentration action spell with a range of 60 feet requiring semantic components, and it will last for up to 1 hour. You reach into the mind of one creature you can see within range. The target must make a wisdom saving throw, taking 3d8 psychic damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. On a failed save, you also know the target's location until the spell ends, but only while the two of you are on the same plane of existence. While you have this knowledge, the target can't become hidden from you, and if it's invisible, it gains no benefit from the condition against you. When you cast the spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot level above 2nd. Nethair's Mischief, a concentration action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring semantic and material components, the material component being a piece of crust from an apple pie. It will last for up to 1 minute, and when you cast it, you fill a 20-foot cube you can see within range with fey and draconic magic. Roll on the mischievous surge table to determine the magical effect produced, and roll again at the start of each of your turns until the spell ends. You can move the cube up to 10 feet before you roll. It's a d4, and if you roll a 1, the smell of apple pie fills the air, and each creature in the cube must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or become charmed by you until the start of your next turn. If you roll a 2, bouquets of flowers appear all around, and each creature in the cube must succeed a dexterity saving throw or be blinded until the start of your next turn as the flowers spray water in their faces. If you roll a 3, each creature in the cube must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or begin giggling until the start of their next turn. A giggling creature is incapacitated and uses all its movement to move in a random direction. And if you roll a 4, drops of molasses appear and hover in the cube, turning it into difficult terrain until the start of your next turn. Phantasmal Force, a concentration action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a bit of fleece. You craft an illusion that takes root in the mind of a creature you can see within range. The target must make an intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, you create a phantasmal object, creature, or other visible phenomenon of your choice that is no larger than a 10-foot cube and that is only perceivable to the target for the duration. This spell has no effect on undead or constructs. The phantasmal includes sounds, temperatures, and other stimulations, also evident only to the creature. The target can use its action to examine the phantasm with an intelligence investigation check against your spell save DC. If the check succeeds, the target realizes the phantasm is an illusion and the spell ends. While a target is affected by the spell, the target treats the phantasm as if it were real. The target rationalizes any illogical outcome from interactions with the phantasm. For example, a target attempting to walk across a phantasmal bridge that spans a chasm falls once it steps onto the bridge. If the target survives the fall, it still believes that the bridge exists and comes up with some other explanation for its fall. For example, it was slipped, or it was pushed, or a strong wind might have knocked it off. An affected target is also convinced of the phantasm's reality, that it can even take damage from the illusion. A phantasm created to appear as a creature can attack the target. Similarly, a phantasm created to appear as fire, a pool of acid, or lava can burn the target. Each round on your turn, the phantasm can deal 1d6 psychic damage to the target if it is in phantasm area within 5 feet of the phantasm, provided that the illusion of a creature or hazard could logically deal damage, such as by attacking. The target perceives the damage as if it were the type appropriate for the illusion. Rhyme's Binding Ice, a action spell requiring semantic and material components, that material component being a vial of meltwater. When you cast it, a burst of cold energy emanates from you in a 30-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 3d8 cold damage and is hindered by ice formations for 1 minute, or until another creature within reach of it uses an action to break away the ice. A creature hindered by ice has its speed reduced to 0, and on a failed save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't hindered by ice. When you cast the spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, increase the cold damage by 1d8 for each slot level above 2nd. Shadow Blade, a concentration bonus action spell that you cast on yourself with verbal and semantic components. It'll last for up to 1 minute, and when you cast it, you can weave together threads of shadow to create a sword, solidified gloom, in your hand. This magic sword lasts until the spell ends. It counts as a simple melee weapon with which you are proficient, and it deals 2d8 psychic damage on a hit. It has the finesse, light, and thrown properties, with a range of 20 and then a farther range of 60. In addition, you can use the sword to attack a target that is in dim light or darkness, and you make that roll with advantage. If you drop the weapon or throw it, it dissipates at the end of the turn. Thereafter, while the spell persists, you can use a bonus action to cause the sword to reappear in your hand. And casting this at a 3rd or 4th level spell slot, the damage increases to 3d8. When you cast it using a 5th or 6th level spell slot, the damage increases to 4d8, and casting it with a slot of 7th level or higher, the damage is increased to 5d8. Next up, we have Summon Beast, which I believe is less of a spell and more of a class option based on how it's written. But I'm going to read it anyway because it's technically on the spell lists. So, it is an action spell that requires concentration for up to an hour with a range of 90 feet. And it requires verbal, semantic, and material components, that material component being a feather, tuft of fur, and fishtail inside of a gilded acorn worth at least 200 gold pieces. You call forth a bestial spirit. It manifests in an unoccupied space that you can see within range. This corporeal form uses the bestial spirit stat block. When you cast this spell, choose an environment: air, land, or water. The creature resembles an animal of your choice that is native to the chosen environment, which determines certain traits on its stat block. The creature disappears when it drops to 0 hit points or when the spell ends. The creature is an ally to you and your companions in combat. The creature shares your initiative count, but it takes its turn immediately after yours. It obeys your verbal commands, no action required by you. If you don't issue it any, it takes the dodge action and uses its move to avoid danger. And if you cast the spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, use the higher level where the spell's level appears in the stat block. So here's the bestial's stat block. It is a small beast. Its armor class is 8 plus the level of the spell, natural armor. It has 20 hit points for air, 30 for land or water, and plus 5 for each level cast above 2nd. Speed is 30 feet. It has a climbing speed of 30 feet if it's land, a flying speed of 60 feet if it's air, and a swimming speed of 30 feet if it's water. Its strength is 18, so plus 4. Its dex is 11, plus 0. Constitution is a 16, plus 3. Intelligence is a 4, so a minus 3. Wisdom is a 14, a plus 2. Charisma is a 5, so a minus 3. It has dark vision for 60 feet, a passive perception of 12. It understands any languages you speak, and its proficiency bonus equals your proficiency bonus. If you have the air beast, it has the flyby trait, which the beast doesn't provoke opportunity attacks when it flies out of an enemy's reach. If it's the land or water beast, it has pack tactics, which means it has advantage on rolls against a creature if it has at least one ally within 5 feet of the creature, and the ally isn't incapacitated. And if it's the water beast, it has water breathing, so it can breathe only underwater. It has the multi-attack. The beast makes a number of attacks equal to half the spell's level rounded down. So if you cast the spell at 4th level, you'd be able to make 2 attacks, but 2nd or 3rd would be only 1. And the attack you can make is the maul attack, which is your spell attack modifier to hit, reach 5 feet, 1 target, and its hit is 1d8 plus 4 plus the spell's level piercing damage. Vortex Warp, an action spell with a range of 90 feet. Requiring verbal and semantic components. You can magically twist space around another creature you can see within range. The target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw, or it can choose to fail. and then the target is teleported to an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within range. The chosen space must be on a surface or a liquid that can support the target without the target having to squeeze. And if you cast the spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, the range of the spell increases by 30 feet for each slot level above 2nd. Wither and Bloom. A action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. That material component being a withered vine twisted into a loop. You invoke both death and life upon a 10-foot radius sphere, centered on a point within range. Each creature of your choice in that area must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 2d6 necrotic damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. Non-magical vegetation in this area also withers. In addition, one creature of your choice in that area can spend and roll one of its unspent hit dice and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll plus your spellcasting ability modifier. When you cast the spell using a slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for each slot above 2nd, and the number of hit dice that can be spent and added to the healing roll increases by 1 for each slot level above 2nd. And finally, we have Wrist Pocket, a concentration action spell that will last for up to 1 hour, cast upon yourself, requiring just semantic components, where you flick your wrist, causing one object in your hand to vanish. The object, which only you can be holding and can weigh no more than 5 pounds, is transported to an extra-dimensional space, where it remains for the duration. Until the spell ends, you can use your action to summon the object to your free hand, and you can use your action to return the object to the extra-dimensional space. An object still in the pocket plane when the spell ends appears in your space at your feet. And that is all for the 2nd level spells. Sorry it took so long to get them out. Hopefully I'll be able to do 3rd level sooner than it took me to get 2nd levels out, but I will also note that 3rd level I believe is the biggest, but after that they start going back down. 4th is about the same size as 1st and 1st-ish, and then 5th is really low. 6th is much lower, and then there's only like 10 or 12 9th level spells, so you can kind of see how it progressively gets less spells the higher you go. So yeah, hopefully I can get out 3rd level sooner rather than later, but for now, I gotta edit this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.